May 29, 1453. Before dawn, the most powerful city in the Christian world was about to fall. For more than 11 centuries, Constantinople had defied every enemy that stood before its walls: Persians, Arabs, Bulgars, Rus, Crusaders, kings, emperors. Countless armies had come seeking glory. All had failed. Yet on this cold spring morning in 1453, witnesses noticed something strange amid the chaos of the greatest siege of the age, wherever the fighting was fiercest, wherever the walls seemed ready to break, wherever victory or disaster hung in the balance. One young rider always appeared. A 21-year-old sultan on horseback, riding through cannon fire, rallying exhausted soldiers, inspecting breaches in the walls, driving his army toward a destiny many believed impossible. His name was Mehmed. Before the sun set, he would destroy the last remnants of the Roman Empire. He would capture the city generations had called unconquerable, and he would change the course of world history forever. But this is not only the story of a conqueror, it is the story of the horse that carried him through one of history's most decisive battles. A horse that witnessed the fall of an empire. A horse that carried a young sultan into legend. Welcome to Dark History Classified. Today we travel back to the 15th century, to a world standing on the edge of transformation, a world where Europe and Asia collided, a world where empires lived and died behind towering walls, and a world where one determined ruler refused to accept that anything was impossible. This is the true story of Mehmed the Conqueror, the fall of Constantinople, and the horse that rode with history as the medieval world came to an end. This is one of the greatest true stories ever recorded. Long before he became known as the Conqueror, Mehmed was simply a prince. He was born in 1432 into the rapidly growing Ottoman Empire. From an early age, he heard stories about Constantinople. To Muslims across the Ottoman world, Constantinople was more than a city. It was a dream, a prophecy. For centuries, religious scholars had repeated a famous saying attributed to the Prophet Muhammad: "Constantinople shall be conquered. What a wonderful leader will her leader be, and what a wonderful army will that army be." Generations grew up hearing those words. Sultans dreamed of fulfilling them. Warriors hoped to be part of the army that would achieve it. Religious teachers preached about it. Mystics spoke of it. Court advisors discussed it. And throughout the Islamic world, many believed that one day a divinely favored ruler would finally succeed where countless others had failed. As a boy, Mehmed heard these stories repeatedly. Some accounts even suggest that scholars and holy men around the Ottoman court believed a great conqueror would arise from among the Ottoman dynasty. Whether prophecy or destiny, the stories left a powerful impression on the young prince. The more he learned about Constantinople, the more convinced he became that he was meant to capture it. What if he was the leader spoken of for centuries? What if he was the one destined to fulfill the prophecy? The question consumed him. While other boys played games, Mehmed studied maps. To understand Mehmed, we must understand the Ottoman world. The Ottoman Empire was built on movement. Its armies crossed mountains, deserts, forests, and rivers. At the center of that mobility stood the horse. Horses carried messages, moved supplies, transported armies, and determined the outcome of battles. Every Ottoman prince was expected to master riding. A ruler who could not control a horse could never hope to control an empire. Young Mehmed embraced the challenge. He spent countless hours in the saddle. Rain or shine, summer or winter, he practiced mounted archery, swordsmanship, long-distance riding, military maneuvers. Day after day, year after year, eventually horse and rider became inseparable. The future Sultan learned a lesson every great commander understood. On the battlefield, a horse was far more than transportation. It was survival, it was speed, it was freedom. And sometimes, It was the difference between life and death. Those lessons would prove invaluable, because the dream of conquering Constantinople was approaching faster than anyone realized. In 1451, Mehmed became Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. He was only 19 years old. Many European rulers underestimated him. Many Byzantine officials celebrated. A teenager now ruled one of the most powerful empires on earth. Surely he lacked the experience to threaten Constantinople. Surely he would be distracted by politics, rivals, or court intrigue. They were making a terrible mistake. Behind the youthful appearance stood a relentless strategist, one who had spent years preparing for this moment. Almost immediately, Mehmed began planning for war. Carefully, patiently, secretly, he strengthened the army, expanded the navy, stockpiled food and weapons, built new fortresses, improved roads, prepared supply lines. Every decision pointed toward one objective: Constantinople. The Byzantines sensed danger, yet they still believed their walls would protect them. After all, those walls had stood for over 1,000 years. Why would this young sultan succeed where everyone else had failed? They were about to find out. Mehmed understood something previous conquerors had not. The walls could not be defeated using traditional methods. They were simply too strong. So he turned to revolutionary technology: gunpowder. The Sultan recruited engineers, metal workers, artillery specialists. Together they created weapons unlike anything Europe had ever seen. Among them was a massive bombard cannon so enormous that it required dozens of oxen to transport. Its stone projectiles weighed hundreds of kilograms. When it fired, the earth trembled, windows shattered, the sound echoed for miles. In April 1453, the siege finally began. The giant guns opened fire again and again and again. For the first time in history, Constantinople's legendary walls faced a weapon they had never been designed to resist. Yet despite the bombardment, the city refused to surrender. Weeks passed. Each night, defenders repaired damaged sections. Each morning, the cannons resumed their assault. The struggle became a contest of endurance. Who would break first? The defenders behind the walls or the attackers outside them? Many rulers direct wars from safety. Mehmed was different. Instead of remaining far behind the battlefield, he constantly rode through the Ottoman camp. Soldiers saw him inspecting artillery positions, visiting trenches, checking supply routes, encouraging exhausted troops, studying the walls through spyglasses. His horse became one of the most recognizable sights of the entire siege. Whenever morale began to weaken, the appearance of the Sultan inspired confidence. If the ruler himself was willing to risk death, how could ordinary soldiers complain? Yet every ride carried danger. Arrows frequently landed nearby. Enemy artillery targeted Ottoman positions. A lucky shot could change history. Every day on the battlefield could have been his last. Still, Mehmed continued, because he understood something many leaders forget. Empires are not built by rulers hiding behind walls. They are built by leaders willing to share danger with their men. But courage alone would not be enough. Because despite weeks of fighting, the city still stood. And soon, the young Sultan would face the greatest crisis of his life. By May 1453, the siege had entered a dangerous phase. The giant cannons continued firing. The walls continued shaking. Yet Constantinople still stood. Inside the Ottoman camp, frustration spread. Weeks had passed. Thousands of soldiers had died. The city refused to surrender. Food supplies were being consumed at an alarming rate. Disease began appearing among some units. Morale weakened. Whispers spread through the ranks. Some soldiers began questioning the siege. Others whispered that Constantinople could never be taken. A few openly challenged their officers. Rumors spread through sections of the camp. The walls were unbeatable. The city was cursed. the army should withdraw. For Mehmed, such talk was dangerous. An army could survive hunger, it could survive exhaustion, but it could not survive the collapse of discipline. Ottoman commanders moved quickly, ringleaders were identified, several men were publicly punished. Among the penalties used was falaka. The offenders were restrained while the soles of their feet were struck repeatedly with heavy canes. Painful, humiliating, memorable. The punishment served a purpose, not merely to inflict pain, but to remind every soldier that the chain of command would hold. The siege would continue. The whispers faded. The discipline remained. Yet even as order was restored, a more troubling question lingered throughout the camp. What if the doubters were right? What if Constantinople truly could not be conquered? Some commanders began expressing concern. Others quietly suggested retreat. Every additional day increased the risk of disaster. European reinforcements could arrive at any moment. A powerful Christian fleet might appear in the Bosporus. If that happened, the Ottomans could find themselves trapped in a costly war with no guarantee of victory. For the first time since the siege began, Mehmed faced a terrifying possibility. His dream might be slipping away. Everything he had spent years preparing for seemed in danger of collapse. Many rulers would have accepted defeat. Many would have withdrawn and tried again another year. But Mehmed was not most rulers. Instead, he began developing a plan so daring that even some of his own officers thought it was impossible. A plan that would shock the world. Constantinople possessed one of the strongest natural defenses in Europe, the Golden Horn. This protected harbor allowed Byzantine ships to operate safely behind the city's defenses. To block enemy fleets, the Byzantines had stretched a massive iron chain across the harbor entrance. No Ottoman ship could enter. At least that was the belief. Mehmed studied the problem carefully. Then he devised an extraordinary solution. If the ships could not sail into the harbor, they would travel over land. The idea sounded absurd. Ships belonged in water, not on hillsides. Yet the Sultan ordered workers to prepare wooden tracks across the slopes overlooking the harbor. The tracks were greased to reduce friction. Then, under cover of darkness, Ottoman sailors and laborers began hauling ships across the land, not around the city, not beside the city, over a mountain. Hour after hour they worked, pulling, pushing, dragging vessels across terrain where no ship was ever meant to go. Then morning arrived. The Byzantine defenders looked toward the harbor and froze. Ottoman ships were inside the Golden Horn. Panic spread through the city. Some could hardly believe what they were seeing. Others thought it was a nightmare. The impossible had happened. The balance of the siege had shifted, and suddenly Constantinople no longer seemed invincible. Even with the breakthrough, victory was not guaranteed. The defenders continued fighting with remarkable determination. Every street, every wall, every tower became a battleground. The city's soldiers understood what was at stake. If Constantinople fell, their world would change forever. Meanwhile, Mehmed knew time was running out. The siege could not continue indefinitely. A final decision had to be made. So he prepared for one last assault. The largest attack of the entire campaign. Everything would depend on a single day, a single battle, a single opportunity. Success would bring immortality. Failure would bring humiliation. The fate of empires now rested on the shoulders of a 21-year-old Sultan and the horse that carried him through the siege. Before dawn, drums echoed across the battlefield. Trumpets sounded through the darkness. Thousands of Ottoman soldiers prepared for war. The final assault had begun. Wave after wave surged toward the walls. Archers released clouds of arrows. Cannons roared. Soldiers climbed ladders. Defenders fought desperately to repel them. The battlefield became chaos. Smoke filled the air. Fire illuminated the darkness. Steel crashed against steel. Men fell by the hundreds, then by the thousands. For hours, the outcome remained uncertain. Neither side would yield. Then a critical moment changed everything. The Byzantine commander Giovanni Giustiniani suffered a severe wound. For weeks, he had been one of the city's most effective defenders. His leadership inspired confidence. His presence strengthened morale. Now he was being carried away from the battlefield. The effect was immediate. Panic spread among the defenders. Positions began weakening. Communication broke down. The city's resistance started to crack. For the first time, victory seemed possible. Then came the breakthrough. A breach opened. Ottoman troops poured forward. The defenses collapsed. Constantinople was falling. As resistance crumbled, Mehmed advanced. Mounted on horseback, he entered the city his ancestors had dreamed of conquering. Around him stood shattered walls, burning buildings, broken weapons, the remains of a 1,000-year-old empire. For centuries, rulers had failed where he succeeded. Now he rode through the gates as the victor. Imagine that moment. The sounds of battle slowly fading, smoke drifting through ancient streets, the realization that history had changed forever. And beside him stood a horse that could never fully understand what had happened. The animal knew only its rider. Yet together, they had crossed the threshold between history and legend. The Byzantine Empire was finished. The final remnant of the Roman Empire had fallen. A civilization that traced its origins back nearly 2,000 years had reached its end. And a new era had begun. After the conquest, Mehmed did something many conquerors failed to do. He looked beyond victory. Capturing Constantinople was only the beginning. The city would become the center of his empire. Its population would be rebuilt, its economy restored, its strategic importance strengthened. Over time, Constantinople would evolve into one of the greatest cities on earth. Eventually, it would become known as Istanbul. Mehmed himself earned a new title, the Conqueror, a title history remembers to this day. His victory reshaped trade routes, altered global politics, inspired future explorers. More than 5 centuries later, the fall of Constantinople remains one of history's defining moments. A 21-year-old Sultan achieved what generations believed impossible. The Roman Empire vanished. The Ottoman Empire rose to unprecedented heights. The world entered a new age. And somewhere within that extraordinary story stands a horse carrying a young dreamer toward destiny. Thank you for watching Dark History Classified. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another journey into history's greatest legends, forgotten heroes, and untold mysteries. What do you think? Was Mehmed's victory inevitable? Or did courage, determination, and a faithful horse help shape one of history's greatest triumphs? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, some of history's greatest stories are carried into legend on the backs of forgotten heroes.